Hello, I'm Fowl Gaming and welcome to this Achroma deck building video. This video is part 2 out of 3, of which you can catch part 1 if you haven't already down in the link in the description. In this part we're going to be covering the next 2 custom decks that we have been making for the realm Siege of Draco Temple. Just like in the first video, there'll be timestamps linked down below so you can skip to any part in the video that matters most to you. As this will be quite a long video, seeing that we're going to be going into 2 decks into quite a deep dive, as well as show you 3 games of the decks versus each other. Before we get into looking at these decks, I want to make a very quick disclaimer, more of an explanation that I forgot to add in video number 1. And that is that these decks are not designed to be the most OP custom decks. Ideally, if you are following this guide to make these decks, you should be doing it because you are making all of the decks, not just one by itself. I recently found this out because I tried playing some of these decks versus another community member's custom deck, and actually they struggled quite a bit. And that's because if you took the entire realm of Siege of Draco Temple and now tried to build the most OP deck, you can make some great decks. If you don't care about lore, if you don't care about mixing and matching from factions, you can make some really powerful decks. But if you do that, the cards that you leave yourself with are not going to be good enough to make their own decks, meaning that unless you start buying extra copies of cards, you're not going to be able to make 6 decks. If the first couple are really overpowered, the other decks you make are going to be really underpowered, or potentially you won't even be able to make 6 decks because the cards you have remaining break the rules. For example, you might be left with, the last deck you make might have 4 cards that are the same that need to go into it, of which that would break rules. So this series, the 6 decks that I'm making, they may not be the most powerful, but the point is that once you've bought the Siege of Draco Temple, you can make all 6 of these decks at the same time using all of the cards. So that if you had yourself and 5 friends round, you could whack out these decks and they would be not only all be able to be played at the same time, but actually they're quite well balanced with each other. So it's kind of like a custom starter pack rather than the best OP custom decks. So I just wanted to make that clear going forward that these are really fun decks to play against each other, but they're not necessarily the best custom decks to play versus someone else's custom deck. With that in mind, let's move into today's decks. So, starting with deck number 3 out of 6 for this series, it is a Drake deck called Vortigen's Sacrificial Raid. For those of you that just want to get stuck in with this deck, on screen now and in the description is a complete list of all the cards you will need to make this deck. Feel free to pause the video now or check the description later to make sure you can build your own. So, let's look at the lore behind this Vortigen deck. So in part 1, we found out that Tenebris was mounting an all-out assault on the Draco Temple, and Darnacusk is defending him. Well, this is not only attack on Draco Temple, but is also a bit of a distraction. Because whilst Darnacusk and Tenebris are keeping themselves busy in that battle, Vortigen is using the opportunity to build a small but really sophisticated team of drakes to attack a separate location. They have got intel that there is a group of small youngling dragons being held up in Draco Library. They are going to be a valuable resource to the drakes, as their plan is to steal these younglings and sacrifice them for the greater good of Achrom. On top of this, 2 birds, 1 stone. They are aware that these younglings are being kept in the Draco Library, of which Vortigen, who used to be a dragon himself, knows that there is lots of research being held in the Draco Library that will be so valuable to the drakes and their cause. So, this is his plan. Vortigen is going to attack the Draco Library with the intention of stealing these younglings and research to sacrifice them for the greater good of Achrom. So now we've had a look at the lore, let's look at the basic strategy you're going to be using to win with this deck. Being a Drake deck, as you can imagine, you're going to be reducing your opponents down to 0 rather than trying to gain to 30. It's just the way that Drake decks work. In terms of your actual strategy though, where the Tenebris deck in the last video was all about brute force and getting loads of characters out on the board, keeping them strong and destroying your opponent that way, with this deck, you don't have as many characters, but you have a lot more control. And what I mean by control is you have a lot of cards that when synergized together, you can actually erase your opponent's cards. So even though you will never have a really strong canvas, you can make it so that your opponent never has a strong canvas either. And you can just keep deleting cards on their canvas, the really powerful ones, by using some of these really good control synergies. With that in mind, let's have a look at the deeper dive into the strategy, looking at each of the cards available and how you're going to use them to take control, as we just mentioned. As discussed, this is a control type Drake deck, and therefore you'll see from the spread of cards that there aren't actually that many strong characters or locations that are necessarily going to win you the game outright. Let's take a deep dive into each of the cards in this deck and show you how you will use them to best control the board and therefore steal or minus your way to victory. Starting with your legendary Vortigen. Vortigen is a really good legendary. He has a steal 1, but his main ability here is his action. Choose 2 of the following coloured shards and erase all cards with the chosen colours. So ideally, you don't really want to play Vortigen too early. You want to, if you can, save him till near the mid game when maybe your opponent is really pushing on their canvas with lots of cards, maybe some legendaries. And by playing Vortigen and carefully choosing 2 specific colours, you can potentially wipe out all, or at least all the best cards on their canvas, as well as getting Vortigen out, completely flipping the tables. He's almost like the type of card you want to play in the mid game to save if your opponent is starting to snowball. Do be aware though that Vortigen's power will work towards yourself as well. So if you were to, for example, choose the red shard when placing Vortigen, it would actually erase himself as part of the mechanic. So do make sure you look at your own canvas and see if you have any colours and try to avoid those if you can. There might be some sacrifices you have to make, but ideally you can wipe out your opponent's board. Next then, one of the rares is Umbra Igneus. Now he is another great control character. Whenever Umbra Igneus attacks, you may also erase a location. So as long as you can keep Umbra Igneus alive to do several attacks, and therefore, not dying the first time he attacks, you can get some really good control by erasing the locations. It does involve you getting him out and safe first. I'd recommend potentially getting your Achrom Balenium that we'll talk about in a moment out first, so you can keep him up for longer. We then have Umbra Aqueous. Umbra Aqueous, fantastic rare, really good in any Drake deck. He's not really a control character, but he's, with his ability to be able to erase a character and gain the shards, it's just a good character to have in your arsenal to be able to keep yourself on a high shard count to spend more cards. We then have Corrupted Portal. Now, with this deck, there are a lot more steal cards than the Tenebris deck, which we looked at in the last video. Where Tenebris, it was all about kind of an all-out assault, minus them down really quickly. With this deck, you might find that you might struggle to steal or minus your way to victory quickly, so it's a bit more of a mid-game, and therefore having many steal cards like Corrupted Portal, which is a steal 2, is really important. On top of that, this also gives you the action to research too, which with this deck, it is very important that you get certain cards in your hand at the same time, so being able to research to look at 2 cards and potentially take them into your hand is really good. Then we have a standard, which is Achrom Balenium. Pretty much a standard card to have in some form of Drake deck. We spoke about this in the last episode, where you can give all of your characters with a black shard protection from chromed cards. Now, I appreciate you do have some dragons in this deck, so they won't be protected, but considering that we are likely sacrificing those dragons, it's not the end of the world. But being able to keep your drakes, as well as like some of the rares we just looked at, alive for longer by keeping them protected is fantastic. Combine that, for example, with Umbra Igneus, and you can now control the locations really well. And lastly, although it's not a rare, I'm still going to talk about it as if it was one, because it's really powerful. In this deck, we are adding the promo card, the Siege of Draco Temple, as it is just a fantastic card to add another location for plus steal 2. Because if you were to get this and Corrupted Portal down, you're already at steal 4, which would be very important. Moving on to the rest of the cards then, we'll take a quick look at these. So as stated, you only have 4 Drakes available, so not too many, and you also have 1 Rock as well. I would recommend, if possible, only getting your Rock out once you've got your Achrom Balenium out, so that way that even though you're forced to attack every turn with Rock, at least you can guarantee protecting them. And then, as you can see, we've got 4 dragons. Now, that's not very many, but the main thing is they're cheap dragons to get out, and it also means that these are going to be the cards that you sacrifice. So down here, you'll see that you've got the maximum amount of sacrifice cards for a deck. You've got 2 Sacrificial Rituals, 2 Ritual of Knowledges, and 2 Ritualistic Notions. The idea for this deck is that you want to get as much benefit out of these as possible. If you haven't seen, Ritualistic Notion means that when you sacrifice one of your characters, you can erase any character or location on your opponent's board. Ritual of Knowledge gives you really good utility of being able to sacrifice one of your characters and draw 2 cards. Very good if you desperately need something like an Achrom Haven or one of your rares or legendaries, but need to draw some cards to get them. And also Sacrificial Ritual, which is kind of like a multi-version of Ritualistic Notion. Each player has to erase a card when you sacrifice one. This is better in multiplayer games because it's going to have a better effect. In a 2-player game, you could argue this is basically just a bad version of Ritualistic Notion. The main thing to remember with Sacrificial Ritual is that the player that you choose to, the players that sacrifice cards, they get to choose which card they sacrifice. So ideally, they get to choose which card gets erased. So ideally, you only play Sacrificial Ritual in a single-player game if your opponent only has good cards on their board, so they're forced to get rid of a good card. If they've got throwaway cards like their own Draco Fledgelings and Draco Hatchlings, I would argue save Sacrificial Ritual until later on, if possible. But the main point is you have these 4 dragons as fodder, meaning that you can place one of these relatively cheaply to then play one of your sacrifice cards to be able to access these really cool powers without wasting an important Drake or location. Now, there is one object of power, I should say, in this build. That's because the other objects have been assigned to the Tenebris deck, as discussed in the last video. And that's because you don't really need objects in this build. The idea of this build isn't necessarily to build a strong character canvas. It's about getting these characters out and sacrificing them to control your opponent's board via control cards more than just all-out dominance. So that's why there's not very many objects of power. As for locations, we've got some really strong locations. There are 2 Achrom Havens. In the Tenebris deck, there was an Achrom Haven and a Mirror Sanctum, but in this one, we've just got 2 Achrom Havens. And now, you won't get that much value out of these compared to the Tenebris deck, because you've only got 4 standard Drakes, plus your 2 rares. So at max, you're talking 6. So you might struggle to get full use out of these, but at least you have 2. There's a Draco Graveyard, which is good for digging in case you need to get your Dracos back. Then Floating Wasteland, Achrom Blockade, and Draco Planium Library. Got some good actions on these, being able to research one to, again, get through that card draw. That means that you can research one on every single turn. Again, great usage to be able to go through your cards to find these sacrifice cards that you need. And then you can see from the actions, we've spoken about these 3. There's also a single Drake Ambush in there and a Search for Wisdom, although Search for Wisdom, in my opinion, is a bit of a throwaway card. You're probably going to use that to trade. So there we go, that's a bit of a deep dive into the cards and how you will sort of use them together. But again, the idea of this deck overall is to get out these dragons to be able to sacrifice them to use these control cards, whilst using your small array of drakes and locations to steal and minus as you go. Now that we've had a look at each of the individual cards and how they all work together, let's have a look at the stats of this deck. As I explained in the first video, these stats are just a really nice way of being able to quantify how much you are going to potentially be able to get during a resolve phase compared to other decks in the series. So starting with the gain, you are only able to get a maximum of 3 gain in this deck. Just as a reminder from last time, that does not mean you have 3 cards with gain on, it just means that if you were to add up all of the total gain possible in your deck, you have a total of 3. You have then 13 minus, which for those comparing is 5 less than the Tenebris deck. However, you have 6 steal, which doesn't sound like much, but you do have a double Achrom Haven, which is going to really bump up that steal potential. And lastly, you have 0 block. Now, when you compare these stats to the other Drake deck from episode 1, you'll notice that the stats are actually a little bit lower, but keep in mind that the main point of this deck is that control element. You're going to last longer in a game because you'll be able to control your opponent. It's not as critical that you can't minus them as quickly as Tenebris' deck. Now let's take a look at 3 positives, 3 negatives, and 1 top tip for this deck. Starting with the positives. Positive number 1 is obvious. You have lots of control. Even when you don't have anything on the board, nothing on your canvas, and your opponent has loads, you have the ability to play a quick dragon and a quick sacrifice, or maybe drop a Vortigen in one turn where you had nothing already on the board and completely change the board. You have lots of control, which is fantastic. The second positive is there is a really strong steal potential, meaning that you have more shards to spend than other Drake decks. As mentioned, in the Tenebris deck, you have a lot of minus, but not as much steal. In this deck, having much more steal just means that when you are minusing from your opponent, at least you are actually gaining shards yourself, which is so important in a Drake deck so that you can play some of the more expensive cards. And the last positive is just generally decent card draw. Now, I'm reluctant to say amazing card draw, but you do have more card draw than a normal Drake deck would. Firstly, you can make use of those couple of sacrifice cards where you can draw 2 cards. We've added a couple of dragons in there which do give you card draw, provided you've got one of the other dragons out. And there are a couple of other cards in there that have actions for card draw, or at least research, where you can look at your deck and pay to keep them. So it does give you some card draw options that other Drake decks normally wouldn't. And now onto the negatives. The first negative, though, is that your strats in this deck will really rely on card combos. Apart from Vortigen, most of the cards that you play, you're going to want to play in tandem with other cards, either on the same turn or on the next turn, to be able to really get the most out of them. And therefore, failure to draw those cards in the right order, or, getting one card down but not being able to play the next one for a little while, will completely destroy the synergy of this deck. Now, unfortunately, that's not something you can always control. Luck of the draw when it comes to drawing cards, but it's a negative that if you don't draw the right cards together, this deck will feel like it has no synergy at all. The second negative is that your rares are all quite expensive. Now, rares are generally quite expensive anyway, but in this deck, you have 4 of your rares that cost 4 or more. And the issue with that is in Drake decks, as some of you may know, you quite often struggle to have a high shard count. So you might struggle to get these out in mid-game if you don't already have a lot of steal out. And that brings me on to the third negative, which is, although you do have a decent amount of steal in this deck, it's more a case of you have a few cards that have lots of steal, rather than loads of cards that have +1 steal. What this means is if you are unlucky and you don't manage to get a few of those steal cards out nice and early, then you are going to struggle, because what you'll find is if you don't get that steal out nice and early, you are going to be forced to start trading quite often to keep your shard count high enough to actually be playing, and there aren't that many cards in this deck that are fodder and you would happily trade, so you might end up having to trade some of your cards that you would have ideally wanted for later just to try and play some better cards now. And then lastly, my top tip for this deck has already been mentioned, but I'll mention it quickly again, and that is do not drop your Vortigen until a decent time. Ideally, you want to wait till mid-game, where you can either drop it when they have their legendary and a rare out, or maybe a couple of rares, or maybe just generally a large board full of characters and locations. You really want to think before you play Vortigen, count it up on your head and go, right, if I was to play Vortigen now and choose this color and that color, how many cards would I get rid of? Try to use it when your opponent is either about to snowball, or like I said, if they've got the powerful cards out that you don't really have any other way of clearing together. Don't waste Vortigen clearing one card where you could have just brought out a baby dragon and sacrificed it with Ritualistic Notion. Save Vortigen for that massive blow, because you could argue it's another negative, but Vortigen is your only major clear. So if you waste Vortigen on just getting rid of a single card, then you may struggle if they then start to snowball again. So moving on to deck number 4, which is the opposite to the Vortigen Sacrificial Raid, as we're calling this one, Tengri's Defense of the Research and Young. Once again, if you want to get yourself just stuck in straight away, build the deck and give it a go, then on screen now is a list and the pictures, and as well in the description of all of the cards you will need to build this deck. Feel free to pause the video now or look down below in the description if you want to just build the deck and crack on. So now let's take a look at the lore behind this deck. So whilst Darnacusk, the leader of the dragons, is currently defending Draco Temple against Tenebris' all-out assault, Tengri, who is Darnacusk's protege, has been assigned a very, very critical mission. Darnacusk has asked Tengri to gather up all of the younglings in the Draco Temple, the future generation of the dragons, and he has been told to protect them and keep them safe. So what Tengri has done is he has gathered a small team of protective dragons, rounded up all of the younglings, and taken them to the Draco Library, which he has also been assigned to protect, as all of the valuable research that the dragons have worked on protecting for so long must also not fall into the wrong hands. And with that, Tengri is hunkered down with all these other protective dragons, and they are going to protect the younglings and the research in the Draco Library. He's heard whispers of Vortigen's sacrificial raid on the way, and they will be waiting. So, looking at the basic strategy then for this Tengri deck. So, just like any other dragon deck, it is no surprise for me to tell you that your win mechanic is going to be to gain up to 30. You are not going to be minusing or stealing your way to victory, just like any other dragon deck. You'll be gaining to 30. The actual strategy of how to do this, though, is a little bit different than Darnacusk. In Darnacusk's deck that we looked at in the last video, Darnacusk was all about brute force, getting tons of dragons out, strong dragons, putting loads of objects on them, and making them so individually powerful that you can control the board and therefore just win by them playing strength in numbers and getting you up to 30. This deck is a little bit different. You actually have more dragons than in Darnacusk's build. But critically, most of the dragons that you've got in this deck are all of the younglings, which are not very well protected. So the idea here is you've got loads of cards, characters, objects, things like that you can use to protect and defend your younglings. So the strategy here is to get all of your younglings out, aka loads of dragons on the board, that won't do very well at controlling the board, but they will at least be great for your strength in numbers, whilst also getting out a couple of stronger dragons with ways to protect and defend the younglings so that your opponent has very little way of actually clearing your board of dragons. So therefore, by protecting your dragons, when your strength in numbers comes out, you can place it and easily get up to 30. This deck is not very controlling, meaning that you don't have very many ways of interacting with your opponent's canvas. There are basically no cards that allow you to erase stuff on your opponent, and the characters that you have on the board won't be overly strong to be able to attack characters on your opponent's board. This is kind of like a hunker down build. You are just building up a decent little small army of younglings, protecting them, protecting your own, so that you can get up to 30. It's a very defensive deck. With that in mind, let's actually have a look at all of the cards and a deep dive into which synergies you will use to do exactly that. Let's start with your legendary, Tengri. He has a solid +2 in the resolve phase. He only costs 5 to play, but most crucially, his action to choose another player, they can't deploy actions, locations, or characters during their next turn. Now, this is going to be most valuable in a 1v1 game where you are completely negating your enemy for a single turn. In a multiplayer game where you've got 3 or more players and you're not playing in any form of teams, this is going to be a little bit harder because you've got to really choose your target. By normal, you'd probably choose a top person who hasn't got very much on the board. There's no point in choosing somebody who already has loads of stuff on their board because otherwise it doesn't really affect their turn apart from being able to gain some shards. Critically, you need to make sure you choose when to play this. You obviously want to get Tengri out as soon as possible for the board dominance and the +2, but consider playing it at a point where maybe you have a few cards you want to get out and be safe, because therefore you might be able to get a few cards down before they can play any action to then counter them. So at least maybe you can get a few turns of having some good cards out while stopping them from being able to get rid of them instantly. Next then is Materno. Materno, I would even go as far to say, is more important than Tengri in this build. Materno is another +2, costs 3 to play, but look at the ability. All characters on your canvas with a shard value of 2 or less get protection, which if you look at this board are all of this top row here. You've got a total of 7 dragons which would be protected by this ability. The whole point of this deck is to get as many of those cheap dragons out and then protect them with a card like Materno, so that you can then wait for a card like Strength in Numbers to come out and get some really, really big shard gains. Do not waste Materno. Wait to put Materno out with either an object of power or some form of other protection, as I'll discuss momentarily. If you put Materno out too early and it gets erased too early, you will really struggle to make this build work. Looking at the next rare then, Impondulu. Impondulu is another really good character to consider, especially if you can actually pair it with Materno if possible. Impondulu is another +2, so fantastic if you resolve, only costs 3 again, and Impondulu grants other characters on your canvas protection from Achrom shards. So if you're playing against a Drake deck, if you can get your Materno and Impondulu out at the same time, not only would Materno give protection to all of those dragons on the board, but Impondulu also not only gives protection to them as well, but also gives Materno protection. You've almost got then layers of protection, meaning that your opponent would have to get rid of Impondulu, then get rid of Materno before they can start getting rid of all your dragons. And you can start to see how that would be quite powerful. The next rare is Jade Dragon Pendant. This is a block 1 object of power that costs 3. And the ability is fantastic. When this card is erased, return it to your hand, which means that this card essentially can never be put into your dregs pile. Whenever it gets erased, it goes back to your hand. It does mean that you have to always pay 3 to get it back on the board, but it's a constant form of extra defense. My recommendation is you put Jade Dragon Pendant, ideally on your Impondulu or your Materno, to give them extra protection themselves, because again, if you've got your Impondulu or Materno out and give them Jade Dragon Pendant, it makes it even harder for your opponent to get rid of them, unless they have some form of action, obviously. It makes it much harder for them to get rid of them, and therefore protects your dragons for longer. The last rare we've got here is Igneus. Now, he doesn't really do much in terms of the whole protection route, but he's just a very strong rare to include in this deck. When he attacks, you get to also erase a character or location on the same canvas with a shard value of 3 or less. Essentially, it means that he can not only potentially attack a character with 2 shards or less, killing that, and destroy another 3 shard location. If you need to attack a character that, let's say, has 3 shards, but also has an object of power that has 2 on it, therefore, if you were to attack with Igneus, Igneus would die. Don't forget that you can use Igneus to begin the attack, and before the attack actually happens, use his power to erase that character with a shard value of 3 or less, therefore deleting both the character and the object, meaning that Igneus wouldn't have died in that attack. It's quite a subtle rule, but it's a really important one to consider when using Igneus. Looking at the rest of the cards in this deck then, we've mostly spoke about the important ones. So as I said, you've got all these dragons up here that cost 2 or less that you ideally want to get out around the time that you've got your Materno. You've got some stronger dragons here as well. Critically, your Achroma Draco. He is sort of like a mini version of Materno. So he doesn't give any form of protection, but what he does do is once per turn you can defend another character on your canvas. So if you don't have your Materno out, or your Materno is already erased, this is a good secondary option, because what you can do is if you have Achroma Draco, potentially 2 of them, out on your board at the same time, potentially with some objects of power as well to make him stronger, he can essentially defend once per turn any of your other dragons, keeping them alive for a little bit longer. Objects of power wise, I had to put in 2 of Ring of Ice, because Ring of Ice also allows that whichever character it's attached to once per turn defend any other character on your canvas. So even though Achroma Draco is actually a relatively nothing card, what I mean by that is Achroma Draco doesn't actually give you any resolve, and once you've played him and drawn a card, he's just basically a 3/3 character. But if you were to then combine him with a Ring of Ice, you've now got another character that's now a 6/6 that can defend any of your dragons. You can see where we're going here with this whole protection route. Prism Stone is just a fantastic object anyway to add in. Doesn't give any form of protection, but it gives more strength to whoever you give it to, and it's a +3 in the resolve, which is incredible. Locations-wise, you don't have many. This is mostly a character-based board. There is a Monastery Nest in there, which for anyone that's played that card before knows how strong that is, just being a +3. You've got 2 Draco Planium libraries, and as we discussed earlier in this video, it's just really important to be able to have the ability to research every turn so that you can try and get through your cards quickly to find the cards you need. And a Great Cloister, again, for the same reason. It's a nice little way of stealing one, but it also gives you that action of research. And then lastly, actions-wise, they speak for themselves, really. Strength in numbers is a staple of any dragon deck. The whole point of this is that you get those dragons out, keep them protected until you can play your strength in numbers to win the game. Ideally, with strength in numbers, just like before, you want to wait until you have quite a few dragons on the board before playing them, unless you're in a really sticky situation. There isn't that much control in this deck, I'll be honest. This is not about controlling the other board, this is about you just protecting yourself. So unfortunately, you only have 1 Breath of Ice to erase a location, and you only have 1 Dragon Defenses to erase 2 Drakes. So you're not going to be able to control the board very well with this deck, but you are going to be able to protect your own. And then lastly, as we said in the lore that this is taking place in the library, we've also got access to Research Collection and Restless Research. Restless Research is a great card to be able to research 3 and go through your board. And Research Collection, You can use it in the game if you want to. It means that everybody has to discard one card, and you may put one of these cards in your hand, which could be quite strong. However, it's more in there because as a 4-cost card, if you're really desperate for shards one turn, it's actually quite a good card that you could throw away and trade to get those 4 shards. So now we've had a good look at all of the cards in this deck and how essentially you're going to use them to protect your dragons, to use your strength in numbers. Moving on to the stats for this deck. There is a total of 21 gain potential. There is no option to minus. There is 1 single steal from the Great Cloister, but it's not exactly going to do you that much. And there is also 1 single block from your Jade Pendant. So as you can see, it's very much a gain deck. You will notice as well that this is actually a little bit less gain than in the Darnacus build. But the difference here is although you have less overall gain, compared to the Darnacus build, you have so many ways to protect your gain that you are more likely going to be able to sustain that gain for a longer period of time, which will still get you to 30. So now let's take a look then at the 3 positives, 3 negatives, and 1 top tip for this deck. The first positive is, as we've just discussed, there is many ways to run this protect or defend strat, meaning you don't have to worry about card draw. Whether it's Impondulu, Materno, whether it's your Glacier Draco, or one of your other Dracos like Laquita Draco with a Ring of Ice, you've got so many options to protect or defend, which means that if you don't necessarily get the right card draw to begin with, you're almost certainly going to find some way to protect your dragons nice and early. The second positive is there is quite a few cards to card draw, as well as research, meaning that in the scenario where you're desperately digging for a certain card, you can rattle through a deck quite quickly using these cards to be able to find the cards you need to continue the strategy. Thirdly, there are some seriously strong options to double down on protection. We kind of discussed it already in the strategy, but being able to play Impondulu as well as Materno, giving that double protection is just so strong. You could potentially, if you wanted to in this deck, add in a Nui to be able to get even more protection, but maybe that's a bit overkill at that point. Now moving into the negatives though, the first one is if you are unlucky to not have a way of protecting, then your characters themselves are very weak. So although we just said that one of the positives is you have many ways to do it, if there is a situation where you have no way to protect or defend your smaller characters, you are going to struggle to get those smaller characters out and not have them killed next turn. And also, without, they have no real benefit to you until you play your strength in numbers. So I would even argue as a side tip, don't play your baby dragons unless you have a way of protecting them on the same turn, just to be safe. The next negative is that your legendary isn't very strong in 3+ games. Now this is subjective, but in my opinion, if you are playing this deck against 3 or more players, it's one of the weaker decks in the sense of legendary, because its legendary only blocks one player rather than everybody else. And you might then potentially get a bit of a nemesis and they might then focus you down. And the third negative, which is your characters themselves don't give you much gain. Most of your gain potential in this round will come from your locations, some of your rares and legendaries, and then a couple of your dragons. So most of the dragons you put out aren't going to give you much gain. So you're not going to gain loads of shards in the early game, but when you do get your first strength and numbers down, that's when you're going to really have those shards to spend. And then lastly, the top tip might be a bit of an obvious one, but it's to not use your Jade Pendant on the wrong person. It might be very tempting to put your Jade Pendant on maybe one of your small baby drakes early on to try and maybe keep them alive, ready for a protection. But the issue is, if the opponent doesn't actually destroy them, and then you get something like your Materno or your Impondulu out, although that dragon is now protected, which is great because they can do bigger attacks with Jade Pendant, if they're not going to be dying, then your Jade Pendant stays on that dragon. That means you have no easy way of retrieving that Jade Pendant to give it to your Materno or Impondulu, which are the more important characters to have that object, because it means that they will be less likely to be killed and keep the rest of your dragons safe. So you can do it, but my recommendation would be hold on to your Jade Pendant until you have Materno or any of your other combos of protection or defend, just to make those the stronger characters, as that's kind of the whole point of the lore of this build as well. And there we have decks 3 and 4 in this 6-deck series for Achroma deck building. If you want to keep watching, you're now about to see 3 games of these 2 decks versus each other to see how these synergies and strategies work out in an actual game scenario. And these were some actually really fun games. Each deck won at least one time, and it was really, really fun to play, so I hope you enjoy them. However, I would like to take a moment to say that if you are going to end the video here, thank you very much for watching, like, subscribe, all that jazz. But if you want to see the games, then carry on watching, and remember there's timestamps in the description if you want to skip to another game.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to start by... I'm going to play the Siege of Draco Temple promo card, which annoyingly I can't actually play on my stream, for 4. And I'm going to also play Caeruleum Draco for 3, which means you have to discard a card from your hand you can choose.
I got a Ring of Ice.
Okay. And then I will resolve. Obviously, I can't steal because it's my first turn, so I just gain 1. And surprisingly, I'm actually going to trade a Sacrificial Ritual at this point to go back up to 7. And then my turn there.
Okay, I'm going to start by drawing.
Cool.
Play Library. I'm going to use its effects for research.
Yep.
Always draw a card.
Very nice.
I'm going to play Tengri.
Oh, damn. Good start.
Then we go to Resolve, gain 3. So I was kind of hoping you didn't just play something which drains or steals as a location. You're still going to get that.
Yeah.
And I will just draw a card.
Okay.
Your turn. Well, I'll say your turn. All you do is draw and trade.
It's my minimal turn, yes. Or I technically... So one thing I've noticed about that, Tengri, is it doesn't say I can't play an object of power. If I had an object of power that I wanted to play, that is.
Yeah, true.
I will... Yep, so yep, I will draw. Okay, I got a good idea. So yeah, I'll go straight to my resolve, which is to +1 and steal 2. I will end my turn then by trading Ritual of Knowledge, which is, so that's a real shame. Ritual of Knowledge is the one where I can sacrifice something and draw 2 cards. So I was thinking, well, I may as well sacrifice my Draco because you're going to kill it next turn anyway and get 2 card draw, but obviously I can't do that because it's an action. Yep, there you go. That is my turn over.
Nice. I'm going to start by trading my Liquatio Draco. Will go up to 3.
Yep.
Then going to attack your whatever.
Caeruleum Draco, yep.
Yeah, with Tengri. I'm going to research with Library. I'm going to draw it. I'm going to play Draco Hatchling and Materno.
Yep.
1, and then go to Resolve.
Turn.
Puts me up to 7, and then I'm going to end by drawing.
Cool. Great turn. Okay, so I will start by drawing. Okay. So I am going to play... It's going to be a bit of a shame, to be honest, but you can see why I'm doing it.
Vortigen.
So, yeah, I'm going to play Vortigen. I was lucky enough to also get my card out. So I'm going to choose light blue and dark blue. So that from your side, that gets rid of Tengri, your Materno, and your Library. But unfortunately, that does also get rid of my own promo card, because that has both those colors in it as well. So it's a bit of a shame. But
Definitely should have said red, yeah.
yeah, but if I said ready, get rid of Vortigen himself. And I'm also now going to play Achrom. I'm putting out all my cards on the table at this point. Achrom Balenium for 5 as well, meaning that now my Vortigen also has protection from any, essentially any colors. I'll go to my resolve, which is to steal just a measly 1 and -2. And although this does mean that I'll have no cards in my hand afterwards, I will actually trade Search for Wisdom just to at least finish on a high number. But no cards in my hand now. Your turn. Out of interest, did you have Tengri in your starting hand?
Yep.
Yeah, I had my Legendary as well. Quite good luck.
I'm going to start by trading away my Dragon Defenses because it's useless.
Yeah. Well, it's not necessarily, but useless against Vortigen anyway.
I think I just have to do this. I have to just play my Library.
Yep.
Too. And research and grab that. Go down to 5.
Yep, so that will leave you on 2 if I don't play anything else.
Not much I can do. I'm just gonna draw. Well, I'm gonna resolve. Go up to 7 and draw.
Okay. All right, so I'll start my turn by drawing because that's all I can do. Oh, this is actually wasteful. So I'm going to play for 2, Draco Whelp. Actually, no, sorry. I'm going to attack first. I'm being silly. I will play that in a second. But yeah, I'll use my Vortigen to defeat your little Fledgeling. So I'll then play my Draco Whelp for 2. Which normally this wouldn't work in a Drake build. But if you have another dragon character on your boards, then I can draw a card. So thankfully Vortigen is technically a dragon, so I can draw. No, I'm just gonna go to my resolve. So that is to steal 1, -2. I'm gonna end my turn by drawing.
I'm gonna have to start by trading. Research collection, so I go up to 8.
To be fair, research collection is actually in that deck as kind of like in a multiplayer game that could be useful. In a 2-player game, that card is literally in there as a free trade.
My Impundulu.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, and then equip a Jade Dragon Pendant on it. 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
But by doing so, though, I've just paid 6 worth of shards, put me down to 2. I'm only going to get 3 back at the end of my turn, so I'm 5, and you're already stealing, well, taking 1,
Well,
2. Well, I guess I get to block 1 with the pendant. Can I get overviews in my library here? You've got 2 cards in hand. You've got -2, steal 1. I'll block the steal with my pendant.
I'll be honest, I do have a card in my hand that I can at least steal another 1 on my next turn. Not steal, -1.
Well, anyway, let's just gain the 3 first. Just go up to 5. Yeah, I'll research the 1, go down to 4, and I will trade. 1, 2, 3, 7. Yep.
Okay.
And it's your turn.
So you've still done quite well there. Even though you are aware that you can lose your Jade Pendant in a second, at least by having the Jade Pendant there, your Impundulu isn't going to die to my Vortigen, which means it's going to be alive for another turn, which helps you protect something else. So I'll start my turn by drawing. That is quite nice. So attacking wise, yeah. So I'll use my Vortigen to attack your Impundulu and Jade Pendant, which will defeat the Jade Pendant, not the Impundulu, and my Vortigen won't die because of my Achrom Balenium giving them protection.
That's the thing, because I need to draw a removal card either for the location or the Vortigen.
Yeah, I'll be honest. The fact that I've got these 2 cards not only in my hand but out so early on in this game, I mean, it had them out like 3 turns. That is pretty much like the best case scenario for this deck. Like, I've had a very strong start. There's no doubting that. Even though you've had your Tengri as well. Now, actually, I realize as well. I may as well actually attack with my Draco Whelp in Impundulu as well, but during the attack phase. Because my Vortigen would have left your Impundulu down on 2. So yeah, that'll delete those 2. I will then.
It doesn't work. Build a bigger guy. It doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, if it wasn't for that little dragon, that would have actually worked quite well. But I forgot that I had him. Okay.
You should have Balenium.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I just happened to pick up another one of my rares in this turn as well. Corrupted Portal, which means I get to research 2. Wow. Yeah, I will not pay 1, but I'll put them back in that order. I'll then go to my result.
I'm drawing a Fledgeling. I can't do anything. I've got.
Yeah, because that's going to be steal 3 and -2. So you say you drawing Fledgling, you're not going to be able. You would just trade and be up to 4. Is that what you're saying?
I'd have a pendant and a 1 attack guy, which does nothing.
So at most you could trade up to. You probably could trade 4. That put you up to 6. And yeah, I could play that next turn. So yeah,
cards ain't changing the situation. So it's...
Okay, so I'll just steal my way to win that one. Let's play another one of those because that was a good first game. But even though you could argue that, even though you could
win the game, like if you have a legendary which does something that good, I think it deserves to win the game.
Yeah, I am going to start by playing a Draco Hatchling for 1. I'm also going to get out a Malum Drake for 1. I'm going to end my turn by drawing. Oh, and obviously resolve, which is +1.
I'm going to start by drawing. I will play my library and probably research as well.
Sounds good. Is that your Impundulu out nice and early? Very nice.
Yeah. He's a rare, but I feel like he's very mediocre right now.
Yeah, and, you know, in most decks, he wouldn't be that important, but, like, when you're versing another Drake deck, he's just, like, he is, like, a very good rare.
Then also play Glacies Draco.
Very nice.
I will get to resolve, game 3, and then I'm going to trade away a, what is it called, research collection.
Nice turn. Okay. So I'll start by, let me think. Yeah, I'll start by drawing. I'm going to play, I'm not going to attack anything, obviously. I'm going to, oh no, I'll do that at the end. Or should I do it now? No, I'm going to do it now. I'm going to play Ritual of Knowledge, which is a common action. Kind of the whole point of this deck is I sacrifice dragons for the greater good, so I will sacrifice my little Draco Hatchling, which means I get to draw 2 cards. I'm definitely going to kill my Malum Drake next turn. I've got some good cards, but I'm in a slight tight spot. I guess all I can really do... I'm just going to play a Draco Graveyard for 2, which just is a -1, and once per turn, if I wanted to, I could discard 2 cards to dig 1. I'm just going to go straight to my resolve, which is to -2 from you.
Okay.
And I'm going to end my turn by drawing.
I will start by drawing a card. Then I will attack, it doesn't matter which one, into your Drake.
He's definitely dead. So I just want to say as well, that is a really good start you've got, like in terms of like how I've built that deck. Because the whole point of that deck is you've got a lot of weak dragons, but not only can you now once per turn defend them with your Glacier Draco, but your Glacier Draco is protected by your Impundulu. So I have to get rid of your Impundulu, then get rid of your Glacier Draco before I could then get rid of any of the dragons you play.
Yeah, so I'm going to play Whelp. And I have a dragon, so I'm going to draw 1.
Yep.
I'm going to play Hatchling. And I'm also going to use Library, which I'm going to draw. I'm just going to go to
Resolve?
Resolve, yeah. So I gain 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'm just going to draw.
Cool. All right, so I'll start by drawing. So it might be a bit of a risk, but I'm actually going to spend 2 Ritual of Knowledge, and I'm actually going to sacrifice my own Draco Graveyard. So this is going to be a bit of a mid to long game for me, but this will have worked out quite well if I can make it work. So I am going to... I'm not going to play anything, because I can't without you basically destroying it. But what I am going to do is just end my turn by now trading Drake Ambush, which is quite not the best card to necessarily trade, because you know that could get rid of your Tengri when it comes out. But right now it's got no use, and I need those shards for other cards in my hand. So I will end my turn with 9 shards.
So I'm going to start by drawing. Then again, I forgot you put 1 Monastery Nest in this deck, which I just drew, which is probably very good right now.
As well, Jordan.
I'm going to use my library.
Yep.
Draw again. I'm going to play the Monastery Nest, which is probably the best card in the deck right now.
Yep.
Then I'm going to gain 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then I'm going to draw.
Okay, yeah. So I'm going to trade, to begin with, my rock for 2. I went the wrong way. I should be on 11. Okay. This could go all wrong if you have a way of controlling my deck, my canvas in your hands, like, instantly. But if you don't, then I might snowball. So I'm going to play Achrom Balenium for 5. Bring me down to 6. I'm also going to play down for 4. Bring me down to 2. And Achrom Haven, which is the location which gives me as many steel as I have drakes out on the boards. And wouldn't you know it, for my last shard that I can spend this turn, I will get out a nice and simple little Malum Drake for 1. I'll then go into my resolve phase, which is to -1, 2, 3. And then I get to steal 1 thanks to the Achrom Haven. And I'm going to end my turn. Oh gosh, have you got any steel in your deck? I think you might have. Oh yeah, you have that one. You have that one. What's it called? The temple thing. So I think I'm safe for a turn. So I'm going to draw. And I'm glad I did because that's what I needed.
Okay. I'm going to play Breath of Ice on your Achrom Balenium.
Yeah, I thought to myself, if you have that Breath of Ice, then I might be a little bit screwed. Yep, fair play.
Yeah, I had 8 cards in hand.
Yeah, you've been just waiting for the right opportunity, yeah.
I'm going to attack your thing, your Drake with anything, doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter, they're all gone.
Apart from Hatchling, of course.
Yeah.
I'm going to put Prism Stone on my... Let's go with Glacius Draco. So it costs 2, but I gain 3, which is the main thing.
Yep. God, yeah. There's so many cards out there now, but it's so fun. We can still understand it.
Yeah, I just need the corner, really. And then I'll go to Resolve, gain 2 from Impundulu, gain 3 from the Stone, gain 1 from Hatchling, gain 3 from Nest, 1, 2, 3, and gain 1 from Library, and then I'm going to use Library's Effect to draw a card.
Okay.
Well,
alrighty. So that changes the board quite a bit, to be honest, doesn't it?
8 in hand. That was my...
Okay, so I will start by trading. I kind of don't like the fact I'm having to trade this because it's kind of part of the deck that I like using, but I'm going to trade Sacrificial Ritual because it's not really going to help me out right now because I don't have anything to sacrifice. I am going to... Oh, I've got a couple of ways I can go about this, but no way that I can do it all, not without giving you a few extra turns just to get even more powerful. I am going to, and I hate the fact I have to do this. Yeah, I'm going to literally just resolve, which is nothing, and end my turn by drawing. There's really not much I can do.
Okay, my turn. I'm going to start by drawing. Play Materno. I'm running out of space. I need a better camera.
A worthy investment if we're going to be playing lots of Death Score games.
Yeah, so I just played Materno and then a second Draco Hatchling, and then because I just drew a Draco Fledgeling, which is going to give me +1 for each other dragon. So I have 1,
Good luck.
2, 3, 4, 5. So it's going to put me up to 10. And that's 3 cards. I'm going to use Library to draw. Going to go to Resolve. I'm just going to mess with cards. Anyway, 1 from Hatchling, 2 from Materno, 3 from Prism Stone, 2 from Impundulu. What else do I have here? I have another Hatchling, I have a Library, and I have a Monitoring Nest. 1, 2,
Very
3.
nice.
And then instead of drawing, I'm going to trade away a Draco Defenses. 26, and then yeah, I'm going to win next turn.
Yeah, I'll see what I draw, but I'm pretty certain you win next turn. So yep, I will start by drawing. And yeah, I'll just say now that there's no way I can beat you, so we'll call it there. But so I want to show you what I got in my hand because it's a real shame that if you didn't have, let's just say that you didn't have that Breath of Ice, which considering that there's only 1 in that deck, it could have been down there. Let's just do a scenario where that Achrom Planium stayed out, so therefore you didn't kill that Malum Drake. What I had in my hand to play over the next few turns is I had a second Achrom Haven, so that would have been doubling up on on my steel. I had an Umbra Igneus to get out that would have been protected as well, which is an extra steel, and again that would have now been an extra. That would have been an extra 2 steel. And in the last 2 turns as well, if I'd have been drawing, I would have also had my Draco Temple promo card, another double steel 2, and a Corrupted Portal, another steel 2. So if you hadn't have got rid of that Achrom Balenium, giving me access to a bit more steel, the next few turns I would have been heavily stealing as well as with the protection getting rid of dragons. So that's now 2 games we've played. One where I had a solid win, one where you've had a slower but still solid win. So do you mind playing one more of these 2 decks just to see how it comes out? Cool. And I'll just minus myself to 0, just so you win.
Okay. If I'm going first, I'm just going to play Rubber Draco and Igneus.
Yeah, so that is Rubber Draco, which is a 2/2 and a +2, and you're going to get out your Igneus nice and early on. Very
and
nice.
I'm gonna draw and resolve for 4, go to 8, and then draw.
Okay, so I'll start by drawing.
Play Vortigen and say red. Do it.
I've got a you know what, this is gonna be a really big turn. This might, like, I'm not even sure if this will end up being that good, if I'm honest. But
like, I'm trying to think what good way you have to get rid of Igneus. Is that you either play that double Drake, like 2 of the same Drake, where it says I get rid of a guy, or you play a Breath of Fire, but then that's paying 4 to get rid of a forecast anyway. Or you have Vortigen, or you have Chromatic Extinction. I don't think there's any other way you'll get rid of this Igneus.
Yeah, I don't have. I'll be honest. Yeah, I don't have a way of getting rid of Igneus on this turn, but I have a few ways that I could get rid of it in a turn or two. It just depends on which way round I want to do it. Okay, this is a bit of a long shot move, depending on how you react to it. But I'm gonna go for it anyway. So I'm gonna play Umbra Aqueous for 3. I hope I've worked out my my maths correctly. Which is
4 on it, or are you playing your Umbra?
I absolutely
thing, whatever it's called?
Well predicted. I am absolutely putting a Achrom claw on it, which now makes it 5/5. Okay, so yep. So I played those 2, and then the last card I'm going to play as well for 4 is I'm actually going to get out a Achrom Haven nice and quickly. Brings me down to 1 shard. I will then go into my resolve, which is to steal 1, and then -3. And then I'm gonna end my turn by. I don't know. I'll draw. Yeah, I'll draw. And yeah, end my turn there.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna have to start by discarding my research collection to trade.
Yep.
To 8. I'm not going to attack. Instead, I am just going to play Draco Defenses. Go back down to 4.
Yep.
So it's just going to kill off your Drake.
Yep, fair play. And
then I might as well just play J Dragon Pendant, and I'm going to put it on. It doesn't matter. Well, I guess it can. I'll put it on Ruba Draco.
Okay.
Go down to 1. And then I will resolve and gain 4. Go to 5, and I will draw a card.
Cool. So I'm going to start my turn by trading Sacrificial Ritual for 3. I'm going to play Malum Drake for 1. I'm going to resolve, which means that I get to steal 1 and -1.
I'm going to block the steal with my pendant.
Oh, my apologies. I forgot that you had the pendant, so I will -1 from me if you want to give yourself back 1. I completely forgot your pendant. My apologies, mate. And then I will then play Ritualistic Notion for 2. Sacrifice my Malum Drake, and I'll get rid of your... see, it's kind of a 50-50, but I know you get your J Pendant back, so I'd rather for now get rid of your Igneus. And I will end my turn by drawing.
I'm going to play Monastery Nest.
Yep, good card.
Go to resolve, gain 5. And draw a card.
Nice, simple turn. I will start also by just drawing. I'm gonna have a bit of a slow turn, to be honest. I'm literally just going to resolve, which means nothing, and draw. Literally, what I did was just draw 2 cards.
Yeah, I'm just gonna draw, and then I'm gonna play what I just drew, a Hatchling.
Yeah, a little Hatchling.
A Draco Whelp, which is gonna cost 2, but then I've got 2 Draco dragons, so it's just gonna be 2 black. And just go to resolve, and I gain 2 from Ruba, 1 from Hatchling, and 3 from Nest, and I'm just gonna draw. Okay, that's in.
Okay. I will start by drawing. I really don't want to do this, but I was so the last couple of turns I've been drawing, hoping for there's a couple of cards in this deck that are kind of in there as fodder to trade if I need to in a mid patch. Unfortunately, I haven't picked those up, and I'm getting to the point where I can't keep letting you go much longer. But I'm going to risk it for Chocolate Biscuit. I'm going to just trade and end my turn. I'm not sure if that was the right move.
I'm going to start by drawing. Okay, I'm going to play Prison Stone and put it on my Whelp. 1, 2.
Yep.
And go to resolve. 2 from Ruba, 1 from Hatchling, 3 from Stone. 1, 2, 3, and 3 from Nest. 1, 2, 3, and I'll draw.
Very nice.
Your turn.
All right. I'm going to trade Mortius Drake for 4 to bring me up to 6. I wanted to save this for a bit longer to have more impact, but needs must. I will drop a Vortigen, as the devs like to say. 4, 5. Okay, so let's work this out. You've got... I can't say red, because that would get rid of your Ruba Draco. Light blue would get rid of your Prism Stone, the Fledgeling, and the Temple, right?
Monastery Nest, yeah.
Yeah. So if I say light blue, and I will also say yellow to get rid of your the Jade Pendant, which obviously that will still go back to your hand anyway, but it still means you got to pay to get it back out. So it'll just leave you with those two, and I will then resolve. So it controls the board a little bit, but you've got a lot of shards thanks to that last turn. I will resolve, which is to just steal a single one. I don't get to steal another one because Vortigen isn't a Drake. And I will end my turn by... No, I end my turn by drawing. Yeah, that's better.
We'll play Inferno and Impundulu.
Yep.
Yeah, so all my guys have protection if they're 2 or less, and
which is
protection from black.
Wow, yeah, lots of protection.
And then I'll put my pendant on... Is it just put on Inferno or Impundulu? Well, Impundulu, right?
I would go Impundulu, yeah, because technically you're in...
Everything else is protection, right?
Yeah, your Impundulu gives protection to Materno, and your Materno gives protection to everything else, so that's kind of like the double down. See, that's what makes that deck strong, is if you can get those out, that is now epic for you.
And then I will resolve, gain 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I'll draw. Your turn.
Okay. So I will start. I need to do something because you're going to escalate pretty quickly. Okay, so I'm going to trade. Oh, I really don't want to do that. I'm in the same situation I was the last game where I've got some really good cards in my hand. What I've been needing is I've got a decent amount of cards in there that are kind of like, for the use of a better term, fodder cards that I can throw away for some shards, and I haven't had them. So it's like I have to trade to play, but it's like, which card do I choose? I'm going to trade Umbra Igneus. I really don't want to trade him, but at this point in time, I can't play him because you would kill him anyway with your protection. In my attack phase, the only person I can attack is your Impundulu. I may as well attack because you will definitely kill me next turn with all of your protection. So if I use Vortigen to attack your Impundulu, is that a 6/6 character technically now? So it's just the Jade Pendant? Yeah.
6/6.
That's fair. Even though that seems like a silly trade, like at the end of the day, I have to because you're going to defeat him next turn anyway. In terms of playing, I will play Corrupted Portal for 4, which is the one that allows me to steal 2 and now research 2. I'm actually going to leave it in that order, but at least I know how I'm now going to play this. I'm going to resolve, which is to unfortunately, just a 2 steal. And I'm going to end my turn by trading Impius Drake for 2. I'm having to completely change my strategy here. Wrong way.
I'm going to start by drawing. I'm going to play Library for 2. I'm going to use it to draw. Then I'll play a Great Cloister. That's going to research as well. I'm just going to pick it up, go down to 7, and then I'm going to play a Draco Hatchling for 1. And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, I got 3, although dragons. So it puts me up to 9. And I go to resolve. So Ruba gives me 2. Hatchling gives me 1. Materno gives me 2. Library gives me 1. Impundulu gives me 2. And Cloister steals 1. And then I will take the draw. Your turn.
Cool. Oh, this is could be. I think this is one of those. I think it's like it's reached the tipping point in the game where it's like I'm not sure if I can come back from this. But we'll see.
Yeah, I just threw out the biggest guy, and then you couldn't deal with him, and then I've just had guys out and not been able to kill them in any meaningful way.
But like, this is one of those times where I'm quite happy that I'm losing, because the way that I intended that deck to be played from how I built it is exactly how you've made it so strong, which is nice to see that, hey, a plan that I had in my mind worked. Okay, so I will draw to start my turn. I can't attack. I will deploy the card that I drew, which cost me 4. It is the Siege of Draco Temple promo card. I will go straight to my resolve phase, which is, at least I get to steal 4 now, but that might not be enough. You might win next turn, and I will finish my turn by drawing.
Okay, I'm gonna start by drawing a card. I'm gonna use library.
Yep.
We'll play another Fledgeling. 1.
Yep.
2, 3, 4. Game 4. 16. Gonna play a Restless Research. I might as well just take all 3 of them. And then I finally drew a card. It's what?
So into numbers?
Cards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. Wait, I've got 7 cards left in my deck, and they're both. Well, yeah, I just drew it. Check the numbers. It's cost 2 to play. Game 2 for each dragon number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So game 10. It's 19.
Yep. I think this might be it.
Let's resolve. 1 from Hatchling, 2 from Ruba, 2 from Eterno, 2 from Interlude, 1 from Library, steal from the Cloister, and then I'm going to trade away the Tangri I just drew.
Trading Tangri to win. Fantastic. All right, GG. And there we go. Those were the games. I think they were quite interesting when it comes to the win-loss. Thank you very much for watching till the end of the video. It means a lot. Before you go, please, please, please make sure to leave a like and a comment. I would really appreciate feedback as to what you think what you think of these decks that I've made, and also what do you think of the formatting of these videos. Have you enjoyed watching them? Has there been any bits that you always skip over? I'd appreciate the feedback, as I will be making even more deck building videos after this series. Anyway, for now, I hope you enjoyed it. Enjoy using these decks, and I'll be releasing part 3 hopefully in the next week or so. Just because between you and I want to make sure the 3rd video comes out before the Fall of Flutterby releases, because I'm definitely going to be doing a few videos on that. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Fowl Gaming. As always, stay wholesome. See you in the next one.